Welcome back. I sure hope that you're enjoying this podcast as much as I am, and that you have been experimenting with some of the exercises such as the grounding and centering, consecrations, and the spiritual purifications, and hopefully even started to think about or actually been gathering and or consecrating your tools. The idea of the craft and magic, from the way I teach it, is very, very positive, and it's makes a wonderful, positive, transformative difference in my life, and I hope it is making such in your life. We can use the craft and use magic to create many wondrous changes in our lives and in our environments. And while it's true that there are a few unfortunate instances where the craft and magic are misused and used to attack, for the most part, most of us that are involved in the craft are very good people, and we are very interested in obtaining positive goals for ourselves and for assisting in the healing of the environment and in the earth. Most of us are. And while there are many different types and systems of the craft and different types and systems of magic in general, what I'm hoping to give you here is a system that is somewhat self-contained, that you can just go out and actually work the craft as a solitary practitioner without the need of anything else, and just go for it and just get what you want out of life and make a positive difference in the world. Of course, there are a lot of great resources and a lot of great books, a lot of great different systems, teachers, and traditions out there. And I hope that this is going to whet your appetite to explore even deeper. All right, let's get right into it here. The next class is on the topic of the elements. We can say that all the physical universe is made up of 4 elements: fire, water, air, and earth. If you think about it, no matter where we go, we will only find these 4 elements in many forms and combinations. In the craft, we use the symbol of the pentagram to portray the balance of the elements in our work. The top point of the pentagram, or 5-pointed star, represents the element of spirit. And spirit is the invisible, that which cannot be destroyed, and is the eternal source of all the other elements. That is why it is usually depicted as being the top point of the figure. Occasionally, you will see some groups with an inverted pentagram, and this is not always a negative thing. It's just there are many different systems of magic, but in this system of magic, the pentagram is always depicted as being upright with the spirit point of the pentagram on the top. The logo for this podcast is actually a 5-pointed star, and if you have access to a diagram of that or any pentagram, you can follow along with me right now. In our system, like I said, the top point of the pentagram represents the element of spirit. The upper left point represents the element of air. The lower left point represents the element of earth. The upper right point of the pentagram represents the element of water, and the lower right point represents the element of fire. Notice that the pentagram is rather like a diagram of a human being. If you stand with your arms open and your feet apart, you and the pentagram are mirroring each other. We could say that the pentagram is the symbol for humanity. Let's look a little bit closer at what makes up a human being. First, as we just stated, the element of spirit. All of humanity is connected to one spiritual source. We have one spiritual point of origin that transcends all language and all religion. We are, in the purest cosmological sense, the same being. If you think about what Jung talked about with the collective unconscious mind, he agreed with something like this perspective as well. In order for us to gain individuality, we could say that we created personalities and bodies for ourselves. It's wise for us to remember that our egos or individual separate identities are, in the purest sense, probably not actually real. We are truly one being. Yet for the purpose of having relationships, for learning, growing, and experiencing infinite possibilities, we chose to be born into a world of separation. In order for us to believe in this three-dimensional experience, we have therefore structured a world of finite and mortal limitations. These structures are reinforced by the four elements. It's important as students of magic that we understand that the structures within our three-dimensional experience can be seen as truly illusory. They are a product of our consciousness. This is the way in which we are able to alter our environment by altering our minds. This is magic. The freedom implied within this idea is what the symbol of the pentagram represents to me. Humanity is free to choose the conditions of our world. Our world is a construct of spirit or consciousness. This freedom is possibly the bottom line reason that the pentagram has been declared a symbol of the devil. Of course, we don't believe in such things. Most witches don't believe in a devil. But you can see how people might be afraid of this kind of freedom. We humans have always been afraid of our own power and our own freedom. We've always persecuted those who have demonstrated this kind of power and freedom on any significant level. Let's first begin to understand how the craft views each of these elements. Again, these things are all from my perspective, and if you have, or your teacher has a different idea, you're free to obviously consider, believe, or understand things in whatever way suits you. First, we have fire. Fire represents anything hot, active, or flames. Remember, think of our body's temperature, flames, energy, nerve impulses traveling the synapses, and so on. These things are fiery. The main thing that fire symbolizes in us human beings is will. The will of a witch is a highly developed tool. I read Starhawk once saying that with training, the will becomes like a laser, whereas before training, the will is more like a flashlight. Remember that we discussed that all of humanity is one, and that we can all see ourselves as having the same spiritual source. Therefore, there must be some sort of divine will. Most witches would refer to this as the goddess or the god. I personally see it as the great rite, or the union and integration of the goddess and the god. However you choose to see these sorts of things, maybe you just see it as the grand intelligence of nature, or maybe you see it as chaos. That's fine. It's wise to align yourself with your will with a higher will rather than against it, or your magic won't be as effective. It has been my experience that beginners in the craft use the craft to do their will, and the advanced witches tend to do the will of their higher selves, or the goddess, or however they choose to term this. That's not to say that personal desires are wrong or evil, not at all. We just notice that the goddess makes flowers grow and makes gravity hold us down and makes the planets revolve around the sun and all the things that human beings can't do for themselves. Can you make a person or a galaxy or a flower? I can't. But the same force probably has the right place for us as individuals within her craft as well. I don't see this concept as necessarily a religious concept in terms of this class. It's more of a sort of plugging into the outlet. You know, the lamp by itself doesn't do much unless you plug it into the wall. So I like to plug my will into the source so that my magic can have more power. The idea of a higher will or a greater will sometimes turns people off. It's not necessary for you to think in terms of something being from a religious perspective if that doesn't work for you. But just think in terms of the fact that that there is a power of nature that creates babies out of embryos and creates planets that revolve around the sun and makes flowers grow out of the ground. And that same power can be harnessed for you and for your good. We say that fire is sacred to the southern point of the magic circle, the southern point, south in the magic circle. The next element is water. Water for us is anything that's liquid. If you think about it, 98% of our bodies are made of liquid. So it's a pretty important element. The tides, we know, are pulled by the moon. And then the ebb and flow of bodies of water all fall under the moon's influences. And so it is with us. We are constantly being guided through cycles of life by the tidal pulls of the moon. This is a good reason why the moon has been a symbol for our mothers for so long. She's guiding us through the tides of life. If you don't choose to see these tides as being maternalistic, that's fine too. But know that for most witches, it's senseless to try to go against these tides, because these tides are actually there to serve us. The element of water represents our emotional self, our feelings. Most of us, or many of us, I should say, were raised to, at least on some level, suppress our emotional feelings. We were trained to avoid expressing pain and anger, not get too excited, not tell the truth about how we feel. It's no wonder that a lot of people are trying to go against the flow of the moon or the goddess, because emotions are energy in motion through the body. This is magical energy. Very important to get in touch with the feelings of this magical energy if you want to be effective in magic. When we're closed off to our feelings, we are closed off to this energy. Remember, magic stirs up a tremendous amount of energy. Anything that's unresolved is likely to come up to the surface and get released. The direction sacred to water in our tradition is the west. All right, the element of air to us is any gaseous substance. Our breath is the most immediately important connection to this element. We can live with no food for weeks, no water for days, but we can only go without breathing for a matter of minutes or moments for some people. The breath is the doorway that bridges the gap between the spirit and the body. You can think of the idea that oxygen is charged by energy. We call that life force, or some people call it prana. And when we breathe, breathing pulls in not only the oxygen, but the life force, the prana. And life force is that spiritual food that keeps us alive. Represented by the element of air is the mind or the intellect. The ability to analyze, to create, to memorize, and to formulate concepts and hypotheses. These are all functions of the element of air. In magic, we say that thought is creative, yet thought in this sense is truly referring to the execution of your will via a balance of all four elements. Air represents the mind, the intellect, and the ability to verbalize and cognize. These ideas are carried by the will of fire into an emotional desire to bring about the result, and the form is manifested at last on the earth plane. So air then is the plan or the blueprint or the goal. Air can also represent any kind of intellectual capacity such as creative writing, music composition, debate, science, discussion, and so on. The sacred direction of air is the east. Finally, we come to the element of earth. The earth is truly the easiest of all the elements for most people to contemplate because it represents all physical form. All solid matter is considered earth in magical terms. In humans, this means our bodies. I find it interesting that most Americans take better care of their automobiles than they do their physical bodies. Our bodies are our most valuable material commodity. Without a body, the rest of the physical universe really becomes meaningless. This is why most traditions of the craft in their training have adopted some sort of health, nutrition, and exercise as an integral part of the curriculum. Our bodies are truly amazing. We've been given a gift of owning the most sophisticated piece of machinery on the planet. And most of us take these miracles for granted. Let's start to love our bodies, to be reverent to the most awesome power and intelligence by which they were designed and created. Take a moment to examine our lifestyles here. Let's see. Now, are you involved mostly in activities that contribute to your body's aliveness or to its destruction? How do you feel about your body? Is it too fat, too skinny, too short, too this, too that? How about just loving it the way it is, being grateful that you have one that works on some level, at least allows you to be listening to this podcast in the first place, right? To say that the element of earth represents any solid matter is somewhat of a misnomer, though. As we study the molecule and the atom and all these subatomic particles, we start to realize that solid matter is really nebulous. It sort of all becomes waves of energy on some level. So in reality, there's no solid matter. It just seems solid. So all life is energy. Therefore, even so-called inanimate objects are alive in this respect. That's why the god and the goddess in the craft are often depicted as earth deities. They're the father and mother of the living earth, stones and trees and plants and the sand and the earth. They're all alive. All matter is alive. Everything that is alive is sacred. All matter is sacred. When we examine the so-called order of creation, from our tradition, we find that we begin with the spirit, that which cannot be destroyed, the source of all elements. The spirit must have the will to create. So the first of the elements is fire. This will must have an emotional desire. That is water. Note that fire, being the first element, must create its opposite in order to exist in three-dimensional dualistic world. So out of the desire to create, the will of spirit must also come the formulation of a desire. That's water. Out of this desire to create must come a formulation of an idea or plan. That is air. And the result is seen in the material world of earth. So let's recap that. It's all a big distillation. Spirit produces fire, which then produces water. Fire and water respond to one another, and then air or steam is formed. What's left over after it's all done? Earth. All creation is thus a distillation process. I hope that wasn't too nebulous for you. The pentagram is a useful reminder of who we are and out of what we were formed. Most witches, if they are displaying or wearing a pentacle, represent it with the top point up. We just discussed this, but I want to reiterate it, meaning that the spirit point is on top. This reminds us that we are all truly one in spirit, playing in the world of form. When the pentagram is inverted, spirit down, it's sometimes seen as a symbol of negativity or attack magic, as it could in some circles represent the spirit being dominated by the material world. But oftentimes this is not the case. There are actual traditions that teach that the inverted pentagram is merely a symbol of the earth, and the point is down to represent or point to the earth. Some also teach that the inverted pentagram is a symbol of the horned one. Don't worry about it. If you see an inverted pentagram, it's not going to hurt you. All right? Everything's fine. Everybody has the freedom to have whatever magical or religious expression that they desire to have in this world. In our tradition, we don't invert the pentagram because it tends to cause more confusion. Well, that's the elements in a nutshell. I'm also going to be including in this pod class a little meditation that takes you through each of the elements in turn and introduces you to them and helps you to balance the elements within you and to integrate them. Just understanding these elements helps us to understand how we're going to start working our magic. Please feel free to email us with any questions, or better yet, jump on the discussion board and start talking about this stuff or ask your questions and we'll get them answered for you. Again, that discussion board is located at thedcw.999.org. That's thedcw.999.org. I'm loving doing these pod classes. I hope you're getting something out of them. Until next time, blessed be.